We have quite a wide range of audiences for our music video. The primary audience is females aged 15 to 24 years old. This is because they will be able to relate to some of the events and themes that feature throughout the music video. A male audience of the same age could also be addressed, as we have used the male gaze theory. In our secondary audience category, it is 13 to 15 year olds, as they will aspire to be in a relationship like the one in the music video. In addition to this, our secondary audience could be extended to 25 to 34 year olds, which would include any long-term followers of Robbie Williams, perhaps from when he was first taking off with his solo career. Throughout the process, we received audience feedback in a number of different methods, including class viewings, which included A2 media students, teacher viewings, non-A2 media student viewings. We uploaded our rough cuts onto YouTube and Vimeo and made sure that the settings weren't too private so that people from all over the world could view it, and also they were free to comment on that as well. We also posted a link to our final cut on YouTube in a new thread on the official Robbie Williams fan site. For our magazine ad in the first draft, some of the feedback we received, and as a result of it we actually changed our next draft. This includes the product shot is too close to the number one, and it almost looks like part of it. The plain colour as the background is too harsh, and we could maybe try layering a rural shot behind it instead. We also got told not to line up the QR code and the new music logo vertically and have them on opposite sides so they were more distinguishable. We got told to change the release date to May or June because March was too soon. The images we used needed to be rescaled so that the text along the bottom can be adjusted and be more in scale with Robbie. We should consider changing the font style because at the moment it's quite plain. They weren't sure about how we'd use pre-order on it, but they liked the idea to interact. And perhaps we could have used some information on Robbie Williams records to go on the one theme, for example the amount of #1 singles or #1 albums. So they were all things we changed, but we also got some feedback that we didn't agree with. And this was that the shots inside the #1 would be more effective if they were cropped and not in blocks. But we decided not to change this because at this stage we felt that they looked alright and there wasn't enough time to change it, and the practicality of it was that it was quite a time-consuming task. For the magazine ad, we got told the text needs to be altered because originally it was said to be boring and let down the rest of the ad. Some of the wording used in the magazine ad need to be changed. We could also consider the format of the date and how it was written, maybe not using words but just numbers. And drop his surname and share the R between Robbie and regeneration. And these were all things that we took on board and altered for our final magazine ad. We agreed with what had been said and felt that now the text had been improved. We also received feedback for our second magazine ad draft, where our audience was saying that Robbie's costume was too informal and it would be better if he was wearing a suit because at this stage he was only in jeans and Converse shoes. The barcode is too big, so they suggested that rather than just rescaling it, we cropped it horizontally because it can still be read that way. So this stopped it taking up quite as much space. We had some unfinished details on it. For example, we hadn't included the full copyright statement in the small print, needed to be added. And the main comment we got was that the pictures we'd chosen suggested a country genre rather than pop. But this we had to change because it wasn't what we were wanting to show and it would be misread by our audience. So these were all things that we adjusted for our next draft, and because we agreed what they were being said, and in particular the one about the image choice. So we did feel it was essential to get the correct feel for the images, so at least it'll be portrayed of the genre of music that it actually is. Some feedback we got on our digipacks in general is regarding our first draft. that it was unusual not to have a full image on the front and back cover, and we haven't actually seen anything like this in anything we've researched. Also, it was said that they were too similar throughout, and some of the existing texts do link with the front and back panels, but not on all of them like we've tried to include. Some more pictures are needed, so this requires another photo shoot with our performer, because we need some of the performance shots rather than just the narrative. The title needs to be changed because Greatest Hits has already been released by Robbie Williams. We could either totally change the title idea or maybe add a 10-year period date to add to the Greatest Hits title. After we conducted more research, we found that in general Robbie Williams albums have around 19 tracks, whereas ours only had 10. So we had to do some research and add some more track names to ours. We need to change the DVD that's included in the digipack to an exclusive performance, because the one we originally used, Live at Nebworth, has had a whole DVD released on it already. So this wouldn't attract the audience to buy it as an exclusive footage. For the middle panels, it was also said that we needed to smooth out the edges of the present, because it looked a bit rough at the moment. And finally we needed to change the layout of the images for the middle panel, which was on the present, the little blocks of the narrative, because in some places it looks 3D but not everywhere. We feel that this feedback has been reflected through the development of our drafts. We agreed with the majority of what was being said, and the majority of them were quite small issues that we needed to solve, so we were able to change those quite quickly. For our first rough cut, because obviously it was the very first one we did, we probably received the most feedback, but it was a nice starting point to kind of clarify our ideas and to make sure we knew what we were doing. It really helped, we found. And also it was the first look that anyone had got at our footage, so we got some quite detailed feedback. One of the main pieces of feedback we had was some of the shots were shaky, because we'd had to use handheld camera because of some of the angles and the situations that we were in. Although this is quite a big task to change, it is alterable without having to refilm massive amounts, and in most cases we could just slow it down in Final Cut and cut the clip down again, and we can edit out the shakiness. When the oldest male grabs the oldest female's bum, it needs to be sped up because at the moment it takes too long. A suggestion was that when they're driving we could cross-cut between the 3 scenes of the different ages. We could try and edit the clips so that when there are the high notes in the song, the boy is smiling. Another suggestion was when the lyrics "She's the One" are playing, to have one of the girls on the screen, and this is varied each time maybe. Maybe cut the clip so that when the high notes are on, it's the youngest generation, because it's the most emotive part of the song and they're the cutest kids and it'll get the audience's attention. When we were pitching, our idea was to have quite a linear sequence, but when we showed this on screen people didn't seem to think it was working, so we got told that for our next rough cut we could mix it up a bit, and rather having it Generation 1, Generation 2, Generation 3 continuous, mix up so it has less structure and it's more random. Another worry was that the audience would think that they were siblings, it was a bit incestuous. So we got told to go out and get some feedback from an audience who didn't know our original idea to see if it worked properly and how we wanted it to. They really liked the idea of the train station and him coming off the train and meeting her, but they said that we needed more shots really, and suggested a 360-degree angle of them kissing and maybe some more layering because there's quite a lot of space in the sky that's not being used. They also suggested that we put the oldest generation's dinner time at the darker bits of the song, which is in keeping with this idea of editing the younger kids to the quite upbeat sections. They also said that we needed to create a stronger ending because as it is now it's very weak and it doesn't really have much meaning in regards to the rest of the video. So this is something we're going to look at. Another suggestion was, rather than just having straight cuts between all the clips, have fade-ins and fade-outs to signify that the generations are growing up, really. They also said that we don't always need to show the faces, so keep it a bit more of a mystery for a bit longer. The transitions need to be a lot smoother, and also one of the main bits of feedback we got was we need more performance footage, and also for the start maybe to make it clear that they're not brother and sister, start by filming a photo album with pictures of them growing up together, but don't reveal that person, or maybe we could have a wedding invite or something. The majority of the feedback that we received for this we incorporated into our next rough cuts and rough cuts to follow. However, there were some things that we really just didn't agree with and didn't really want to alter. One of the comments was that Josh's hands were waving about too much during the scene when they're on the Wii for the middle generation. However, we'd planned this, we told him to do that when we were filming, and we think it actually works alright, and it's just people not really understanding. Also, one of the boys commented that the youngest generation couple have blonde hair, but the hair colours have changed throughout the music video as they've got older. And they thought that this didn't really strengthen the link that they were the same people, just older. However, we don't think we need to change this because when people are younger they have a different hair colour anyway, so it's quite it's creating an aspect of verisimilitude. So this is what I think are the most important and most useful pieces of feedback that we've received throughout the project. When we were screening our fourth rough cut, we were told that the opening of the three generations layered on top of each other walking was not working because each clip was a different size and opacity, and this altered the lighting of the clip as well. But we later changed this and got it working near enough to how we'd imagined it during the planning stages, but this was a more complicated section than we originally imagined. Another problem we had was with the quality of the MP3 that we were using, and every time we tried to import it into Final Cut it kind of beeped and broke up sections of the track whenever it was playing when we'd exported it. So we had to try a number of tracks to try find one that works. Some of the shots we'd used were far too long and on screen for too much time, so we had to cut down some of these. Throughout we've had an issue with shaky footage, but through our later cuts we're sorting it by using freeze frames or slowing the clip down and then cropping it so that we get rid of the shakiness. We found it quite hard to make sure that each generation looked in a different time period, and one thing we completely forgot was for the middle generation we've got them typing on a BlackBerry, texting, but this doesn't really show how time's progressing and that's too early a stage to have a BlackBerry included. The audience thought that painting was too young for 14-year-olds, which was the original age we'd intended the middle generation to represent. So they suggested that we said that they were 12 instead, because that's kind of the cut-off point for painting being acceptable. They suggested that we could sync the robot scene for the middle generation to part of the track. For the performance footage we have quite a lot of long takes, in particular the extreme long shot of Jack at the beginning, which we could zoom in on and then cut to a shot of him walking and then perhaps him lip syncing rather than just keeping it that one solid shot. Whenever the She's the One lyrics appear in the song we should have an image of the girls and maybe split screen it so that they're all on the same time. The first two performance shots we've included were far too long and taking up a large proportion of the music video, but there wasn't enough variation in them either, so we had to sort that out. They also said we needed some more close-up of the performer, and maybe layer the performance shots as well rather than just having them as straight edits. They said more multiple layering, and a suggestion that links in with this is the train scene when they're hugging. Perhaps add a ghost or trailing effect so that it adds a bit more variety to the music video. Or maybe an animated zoom, but this is quite complicated to do, so we'd need a bit of assistance. This was a selection of feedback that we received for all our rough cuts during the editing process, and we've taken into account some of the suggestions, for example editing the flying sections to the lyrics of the song and slowing it down and adding a ghosting effect, as we thought it worked well and improved the final cut. However, in some cases, such as the issues with the shaky camera on the youngest generation shots, we had some problems with, because we decided not to refilm their sections because they were young children. It was difficult to direct them the first time, so we had to find ways of removing the shakiness from their scenes using the editing software, for example slowing it down or taking a freeze frame. Now that our coursework is complete, I would not say that our product is purely mine and Jess's idea and vision, as we've listened to the audience feedback throughout the drafting process and altered sections of the video accordingly. Therefore, other people's views has had a huge influence on our video in particular, but it also is represented in the ancillary text as well. The critical feedback we received during the teacher and A2 media student viewings were the most useful, because they fully understood our idea and gave technical improvements, for example suggesting some effects to be added. This would not have been provided by people who didn't take media or have a background in media, and when we did get feedback from these people, their comments were slightly more limited.